Hello and welcome. Perhaps we can begin with some spaciousness. Perhaps we can not be in a hurry to absorb content. When we press the play button, sometimes we already want the contents to be played out. You want to absorb. We want more. And perhaps we can acknowledge the spaciousness of now, that in itself is enough. That all of the nourishment originates from here. It is often the mind that wants more, content, more pointers. It's always in gear, ready to go forward, ready to progress, ready to achieve. The simplicity of now is lost on the mind. It's almost as when you see somebody tapping their foot nervously, or it's always a bit agitated, it can never remain still for long. And this can all be seen. And when this is seen, it is taken care of in the present moment. There's no need to go in there with a spanner and screwdriver and try and bend the mind to your will. It's just, you realize you don't have to follow the thoughts any longer. And with the mind not having your attention, then on its own the thoughts will disperse, will quieten. They may still be there, but it's no longer front and center of your awareness. Perhaps it moves more into the background. A question I've been asking myself over and over in different situations is, can there be space here in this moment? And this question often comes up in moments where usually there is no space. I was in my car the other day driving and I was in a hurry. I looked at my time and realized I'm not going to make it in the time I need to get there, or it's going to be a close call, and immediately there's, my body is tense and it's, a bit faster on the accelerator, a bit more sharper on the brakes, and in my mind it feels like by doing this I'll get there quicker. The more stressed I am, perhaps that will help me get there quicker. And then the question arose that in this moment, can I relax the body? In this moment, can I open myself to the space of now, knowing that I'm already doing all I can to get to my destination, and realizing that by having a tense body or by worrying, it's not going to get me there any sooner, as much as the mind is convinced that will happen. In other times there's been conversations where usually I would get lost in the mind, or there would be no space between my words. And again, I found a question arising during a conversation: can there be space here in this moment? And this allowed me to leave a little gap between my responses. This allowed to leave space around listening, where I wasn't preparing my response, or I wasn't holding on to something I wanted to say. It allowed me just to relax in the listening. And when a gap appeared and there's a response was required or needed, or there was something to say, then it was said in the spaciousness. There wasn't any waiting. There wasn't any there wasn't any nervous energy there. There wasn't any anticipation, is the word I'm thinking of. Anticipating when they'll stop talking so you can quickly get in. What do you want to say? Another time there was some waiting involved. There was nothing to do but wait for, whether it's being in a queue. At the moment, the queues are quite common. There seems to be more and more of them nowadays. Getting into a shop, and in that moment, can you step into spaciousness? Is it possible to move away from the commentary or any complaints about the busyness or about the length of time you've been waiting? Or can you move away from waiting? Can you just simply drop that and step into the spaciousness of now, where there is no time, there is no waiting, there is no delay, there's no being patient or being impatient. There just simply is. And it is embracing that simplicity, the simplicity that the mind can find almost insulting. The mind deals with complex, it deals with adding to itself, progress, making things better, achieving more, getting more out of your day, being more productive, connecting with people better. I must improve that. So it's always in gear. There's a complexity, a heaviness of it. If you could feel the texture of the mind between your fingertips, you can imagine all of the woven complexity of thoughts and psychological makeup, identity. And then there is the emptiness, the simplicity of now, where it's beyond simple. It's and you can imagine that in comparison to the thick, heavy, woven, rough, textured mind, where it's never at peace. It's always in flux. It's always contracting. It's always figuring something out, commentating, not happy about something, or happy about this, not happy about that. we even make this, I used the term spiritual path or spiritual journey, even this is made complex to the mind. The mind sees this as achievement, as techniques, and I need to get better at doing that. I must be more mindful. I've got to do that better. I'm not being mindful enough. Perhaps I'm being too mindful. I'm not living my life enough. I'm being too much involved in this. The mind may say, I need to do all of these techniques, and I need to do this meditation, that here, and this, and all that combined together, then I can finally be at peace. And none of those individually are wrong or right. But it's made into a concept in the mind. Practice is made as a concept. And perhaps you can feel the weight of that the mind carries. Okay, the mind, you may have different compartments for different areas of your life. Okay, friends, relationships, work, home life. Then a section for spirituality. How and then that's measured, and you carry that with you. And then the other side, where you can just be sat down, taking in your senses without labeling, without thinking what's next. Just, you're simply here. You feel your feet on the ground. Perhaps you're taking a note of your breath, of the in-breath, merging into the out-breath. And there's nothing that needs to be done here. No achieving, nothing more needs to be done. And can a deepening happen in this place? Not a doing, but can you perhaps open yourself more? Is that felt? Is that experienced? And experienced as a non-doing, not as where you're putting in effort to become more open. Because then that means the mind has taken over again. Perhaps you can sense the depth of, you may not feel that you are in a place where you've gained some depth in this place of now, in the beingness, but just as you step into the sea, the ocean, you can sense the depth of it. You're aware of the vastness. So the mind is continuously running complex patterns, and it's pulling you into the complexity. So simplicity is almost a medicine for that, a remedy. And you may become sensitive to other people's complexities. in other people's minds, and you may even feel that trying to imprint on you. In the conversations, somebody may talk about their week and stories and emotions. This happened, and there may be a very simple incident, and it's turned into a 20-minute story about how what happened and what emotions that. And perhaps you can sense it in the listening, the complexity of the identified overactive mind. And perhaps you can even watch this from a place of spaciousness, from a place of simplicity. Perhaps you don't have to untangle everything they say. Perhaps you can just be aware of the heaviness there. It's not dismissing it or belittling it. It's just, giving your awareness and your compassion to the person telling the story of their hardships, and just noting you can just note the mind activity happening there. The mind activity that's happening within the simple spaciousness that surrounds it. The spaciousness that may be unseen by this person, may not be experienced, but perhaps you can sense it, and perhaps that will transfer to them. Your presence may slowly seep into their awareness. I believe it was Eckhart that mentioned that in a sense we are all teachers. We may not have a formal title or formal qualifications in that manner, but we can all be teachers to those around us. And this happens indirectly. There's no convincing them to be present and stop going into your mind, but the simplicity of listening with awareness. And perhaps you can sense the energy that shifts, that changes, because you are no longer fueling their mind activity. And sometimes that's reflected back to them, the presence. And suddenly you may find them just wrapping up their story, no longer wanting to continue that, and just suddenly there's a gap. There's no talking, there's just this. So that's something, a couple of questions that have arisen with myself is, can there be spaciousness in this moment? Or another one could be, am I aware of the simplicity of now? Or has the complexity taken me over? So I'm going to do some more reading. And we are on chapter 6 of the Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. And the title of this passage is The Almond Tree in Your Front Yard. I've spoken about the contemplation on interdependence. Of course, all the methods in the search for truth should be looked on as means rather than as ends in themselves or as absolute truth. The meditation on interdependence is intended to remove the false barriers of discrimination so that one can enter into the universal harmony of life. It is not intended to produce a philosophical system, a philosophy of interdependence. Hermann Hesse, in his novel Siddhartha, I'm pronouncing that right, did not yet to see this. So his Siddhartha speaks about the philosophy of interdependence in words which strike us as somewhat naive. The author offers us a picture of interdependence in which everything is interrelated, a system in which no fault can be found. Everything must fit into the foolproof system of mutual dependence, a system in which one cannot consider the problem of liberation in this world. According to an insight of our tradition, reality has three natures: imagination, interdependence, and the nature of ultimate perfection. One first considers interdependence. Because of forgetfulness and prejudices, we generally cloak reality with a veil of false views and opinions. This is seeing reality through imagination. Imagination is an illusion of reality, which conceives of reality as an assembly of small pieces of separate entities and selves. In order to break through, the practitioner meditates on the nature of interdependence or the interrelatedness of phenomena in the process of creation and destruction. The consideration is a way of contemplation, not the basis of a philosophic doctrine. If one clings merely to a system of concepts, one only becomes stuck. The meditation on interdependence is to help one penetrate reality in order to be one with it, not to become caught up in philosophical opinion or meditation methods. The raft is used to cross the river. It isn't to be carried around on your shoulders. The finger which points at the moon isn't the moon itself. Finally, one proceeds to the nature of ultimate perfection, reality freed from all false views produced by the imagination. Reality is reality. It transcends every concept. There is no concept which can adequately describe it, not even the concept of interdependence. To assure that one doesn't become attached to philosophical concept, our teaching speaks of the three non-natures to prevent the individual from becoming caught up in the doctrine of the three natures. The essence of Mahayana Buddhist teaching lies in this. When reality is perceived in its nature of ultimate perfection, the practitioner has reached a level of wisdom called non-discrimination mind, a wondrous communion in which there is no longer any distinction made between subject and object. This isn't some far off, unattainable state. Any one of us, by persisting in practicing even a little, can at least taste of it. I have a pile of orphan applications for sponsorship on my desk. I translate a few each day. Before I begin to translate a sheet, I look into the eyes of the child in the photograph and look at the child's expression and features closely. I feel a deep link between myself and each child, which allows me to enter a special communion with them. While writing this to you, I see that during those moments and hours, the communion I have experienced while translating the simple lines in the applications has been a kind of non-discrimination mind. I no longer see an I who translates the sheets to help each child. I no longer see a child who received love and help. The child and I are one. No one pities, no one asks for help, no one helps. There is no task, no social work to be done, no compassion, no special wisdom. These are moments of non-discrimination mind. When reality is experienced in its nature of ultimate perfection, an almond tree that may be in your front yard reveals its nature in perfect wholeness. The almond tree is itself truth, reality, your own self. Of all the people who have passed by your yard, how many have really seen the almond tree? The heart of an artist may be more sensitive. Hopefully he or she will be able to see the tree in a deeper way than many others. Because of a more open heart, a certain communion already exists between the artist and the tree. What counts is your own heart. If your heart is not clouded by false views, you will be able to enter into a natural communion with the tree. The almond tree will be ready to reveal itself to you in complete wholeness. To see the almond tree is to see the way. One Zen master, when asked to explain the wonder of reality, pointed to a cypress tree and said, "Look at the cypress tree over there." So I'm going to read one more passage from this chapter, and this passage is titled "The Voice of the Rising Tide." When your mind is liberated, your heart floods with compassion. Compassion for yourself, for having undergone countless sufferings, because you were not yet able to relieve yourself of false views, hatred, ignorance, and anger, and compassion for others because they do not yet see and so are still imprisoned by false views, hatred, and ignorance, and continue to create suffering for themselves and for others. Now you look at yourself and at others with the eyes of compassion, like a saint who hears the cry of every creature in the universe, and whose voice is the voice of every person who has seen reality in perfect wholeness. as a Buddhist sutra hears the voice of the Bodhisattva of compassion. The wondrous voice, the voice of the one who attends to the cries of the world. The noble voice, the voice of the rising tide, surpassing all the sounds of the world. Let our mind be attuned to that voice. Put aside all doubt and meditate on the pure and holy nature of the regarder of the cries of the world, because that is our reliance in situations of pain, distress, calamity, death. Perfect in all merits, beholding all sentient beings with compassionate eyes, making the ocean of blessings limitless. Before this one, we should incline. Practice looking at all beings with the eyes of compassion. This is the meditation called the meditation on compassion. The meditation on compassion must be realized during the hours you sit and during every moment you carry out service for others. No matter where you go or where you sit, remember the sacred call. Look at all beings with the eyes of compassion. There are many subjects and methods for meditation, so many that I could never hope to write them all down for our friends. I've only mentioned a few simple but basic methods here. A peace worker is like anyone else. She or he must live her own life. Work is only a part of life, but work is life only when done in mindfulness. Otherwise, one becomes like the person who lives as though dead. We need to light our own torch in order to carry on. But the life of each one of us is connected with the life of those around us. If we know how to live in mindfulness, if we know how to preserve and care for our own mind and heart, then thanks to that, our brothers and sisters will also know how to live in mindfulness. So that's the end of that passage there. And I'd just like to touch on one point that we read, where it's talked about not holding on to doctrine or concepts. That what points the way is not the destination itself. The example here is used as the raft, so the raft to cross the river. And we can imagine the river being ego, as being identity, being non-awareness. So the method of crossing it, the raft, the meditation, the technique, it's itself not to be held on to. It's to be used, to be respected, to be honored, but ultimately it is not something you carry with you, you hold on to. It's simply used to cross into the non-conceptual dimension. It's to take you there, and then once you are there, there is just that pure consciousness. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I wish you well in this present moment as always, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.